As the size of the organization becomes bigger and bigger, from the class to the school to like a state and maybe a city,
Right.
a country, then how would we listen to? What is the best way if to listen to them as they become bigger and bigger? Do you use voting on poll, or do you use the news reflected by the newspaper? How would you listen to the opinions effectively?
Okay. Maybe we can take the question of the lady behind as well.
Good evening, DPM Tiara, Mr. Fernandez. I'm Tiara from CHIG St. Nicholas Girls' School, and I would like to ask on the issue of moral values. So many students nowadays appear to be lacking in certain moral values. And as we all know, moral values go hand in hand with leadership. So must everything be calculated in such a way that it affects entry to tertiary institutions, for example, CCA? Take, for example, CCA points. Many students become leaders, or they render their service to the community counter-reactive to solely for their points. Is this not the point of having them to do CIP or lead their fellow students if they are in it for a more selfish cause? And also, in the past, you decided to join the public service on your own free will. So now, many students are leaders because of CCA points and incentives. So what will happen when our generation, that depends on incentives and points, will grow up and to lead us with, will they lead with no more incentives when they grow up, and who will join a public service then? Thank you.
But you're not like that, right?
No, I'm definitely not. I'm just talking about my observations.
You're not like that. Your friends are not like that too?
I've seen some observations, honestly, so it's quite worrying, yeah. It has been a huge trouble, and I'm sure that Mr. Heng has touched on this issue before. So personally, I'm really concerned about this issue. Yes.
Well, one of the dilemmas which you have, when I was a Minister for Education, you set out some objectives that you want to achieve. Then you say, well, in the end, you do have to measure whether you achieve those objectives or not. So you need to measure it. If you don't measure whether you have achieved those objectives, you don't know whether what you're doing works or doesn't work. So you have to have some way of measuring, and you have to have some way of assessing. Then you say, well, if those are your desired objectives and the desired behaviors and things which you want to see in the students, then shouldn't you be rewarding them if they exhibit those behaviors and they do better in those things? And if you don't reward them and you don't show your appreciation for them if they have achieved and demonstrated those things, then isn't that dysfunctional? Because if you go and reward something else, then they will chase those things. All right? So we had grades. So we said, well, so people put forward the argument that, well, you only think of grades, right? So why should anybody do CCA or take up leadership positions and all that, because if none of this is ever recognized, and the only thing you look at when you go to university or you go to the next school or the next level of schools is how well you've done and what score you've got. So shouldn't you give some recognition for, a person who has played sports or has is a wonderful debater, or is a student leader, or has done a lot of things for the community and so forth. So he said, okay, yeah, I agree. Those things are important. So how do you operationalize that then? So you say, well, all right, then I give him some points for what he's done. And then if he does those things, then, I take that into account when I'm giving him admission to, say, a secondary school or a university or JC or poly or whatever it is. So you need to find some way to operationalize it. If it becomes completely mechanical, then of course, you end up with people, you get some dysfunctional behavior. But I think in the end, everything that you want to do, you need to be able to identify your objectives. You need some way of quantifying or assessing them. It need not be quantified, but at least even qualitatively, you need some way of assessing it. And then if you want to reinforce that behavior, you need to recognize it in some way and give it some worth. So if you have to do that, then you have to have some kind of system like that. Now, you say that people do these things for all the wrong reasons. Well, perhaps some people will, but it is possible to see through people, as you yourself are able to see through people. And when we select people, whether it's for scholarships, whether to be officers in the SAF or whatever it is, we try and see through people. One of the things I always look at when I look at a person is I look for his OCS peer appraisal or his BMT peer appraisal. He can have very good scores, he can have very good results, he can have performed wonderfully in every exercise, but I look at his BMT peer appraisal and I look at his OCS peer appraisal, and sometimes we do situational tests and things like that, and we do peer appraisal and we look at that. And that's quite telling. So what you said to me just now is what we try and do too. That means we try and encourage people to do all the right things for all the right reasons, and we try and reward them and recognize them for that. But we also try and find ways to get to the bottom of what that real person is. And one of the best ways is to ask his friends. Or if he doesn't have any friends, that's quite telling too. And so we try and do it in the same way that you do, and to use your insights to help us.
What about a quick answer for the other young lady on how do you listen to people as organizations get bigger?
Well, there are two sets of issues when organizations get bigger. One is that you have more people to listen to, and you can always, technology helps. You don't have to always meet face to face. You can do electronic chats and all this kind of thing. So technology helps. You can do more outreach. You can spend more time. That's one. So that's almost you can organize it. You can arrange it. You can do that. But the other thing which you have to understand is that when you get more people, you get a greater diversity of views. And if you don't ever have to make a decision, that's wonderful. You just listen to all of them and say, yes, very good idea. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, wonderful. Yes, we should put it here. Okay, I know we shouldn't put it here. All right, I listen to you. But then in the end, when you have to decide, after listening to everybody, you have to decide. You will please some people and you will displease others. And those whom you had to displease will say, you never listened to me. You never consulted me. But it's not true. You did listen and you did consult. But in the end, you have to decide where that bus stop will be, or where that nursing home has to be, or whether you widen the road or not. You have to decide. It can't be a continuing discussion and without having to decide. So it's wonderful. I mean, if I never had to decide on anything and all I had to do was just to consult people, it would be a wonderful life. I just go out to have a continuing series of consultation exercises, and I can make everybody very happy just by consulting them all the time. If I never have to decide on anything. But the responsibility of the government is that sometimes you have to make a decision. Not sometimes, but you have to make a decision. And sometimes you have to cut down some trees because you need to widen the road. Sometimes you have to put a bus stop here in front of somebody's house because you need a bus service. It can't be that everybody wants a bus service but nobody wants a bus stop in front of his house. Then the bus will never stop anywhere. Right? It can't be that you want an MRT station, you want an MRT line but you don't want the MRT station to be built. Can't be. And it cannot occur in an instant also. So I think that part of that process, this is also part of that consultation process, to have people understand that very often there are choices to be made, and that on a particular issue, you may not get all that you want. You may even come out negative on this particular issue. But over many, many issues, over a period of time, that on some you may come out negative, but when you accumulate all of them, everybody will come out net positive, because then you're able to make progress. But if you are unable to come to a decision, unable to decide, and can't move forward, well, you may have a net positive now, but when you accumulate it over a period of time, you may not get your bus service, you may not get a nursing home for your aged parents, and in the end, your small plus may accumulate into big minuses for everybody. So I think that also is part of that consultation process, to have people understand that.